All right, so I'm doing a review. So first off, in your video, you asked me if you should talk about the differences between communism and fascism. I think you did cover it pretty well. I think with the question was, should you go into more detail? Yeah, I think you could go into a little more detail if that was what your question was. Not too much though, because you did cover a good basis. But yeah, definitely it wouldn't hurt to go into a little more detail at all. But yeah, you could do a little more of that. Uh, Also, so to get in the review of my paper, you talk about how far we can push. You talk about how I talk about how far we can push Earth, and I thought it was really interesting that I really didn't put in my paper, but I think I definitely can. Is the concept that even if we stopped doing what we're doing to cause global warming right now, it would still go on for years and years and years to come. You mentioned that, and I really didn't think about putting that in there, so I definitely think I could. And then I guess you mentioned, and then you talk about how I should talk about green theory, I guess, a little more, I think, or you said something, I don't know if you said green party or green theory, but I'll go back and look. But you talk about I should go into more detail into that more. And I think you're right. I do kind of mix them together as one when I should really focus on, I guess, both in different ways. Next, you're going to talk about how I talk about the claims like pollution, environmentalism, just kind of basic stuff of my theory, which is all right. Next, you talk about how I had a good quote, which is "We are all one with the planet, and we need to look at environmental issues as if we are part of the planet itself as one." Um, Definitely should do like I think that's great that I had a good quote there. Um, you talked about how I had to change. I talked about the change in perspective to help environmental issues. Sometimes all it takes is just a little change in perspective to help solve a problem. Definitely could do that. So I thought that was good. Then you talk about the change. Then you talk about some about enlightenment and how I talk about I guess enlightenment, which is pretty good. So I'm going to go into more detail on the enlightenment of the theory. So go into that. Next, you go on to talk about my real world relation to environmentalism and what is going on now. You said that I did a good job, but I should go into more detail, and I agree. I think I need to give more examples of environmentalism today besides just like global warming, high rising levels to sea levels. I probably should go into a little more detail of that. Next, we go into talk about the movie. The movie. How you talk about how I talk about how we talk about what is necessary for our own problems. You know, like how humans. The movie covers how humans just assume that they're in control and that people should like bow down to them, like the people of Pandora. Or how these humans assume that they have control and they can take over because they have the power over these people. And so I should talk. You talked about how I talk about that. Next, you talk about the ideology of the theory. You said I should go into more detail about that. I definitely did not do. There's a lot enough detail in that I definitely need to cover more of for sure. I definitely did realize that when reading over my paper again that I just kind of mentioned it, but I did not go into it. I just said some of the theories are similar, but I really didn't go into detail, so I definitely need to fix that. And then I go back. You talk about how I have talked about the moral point of whether who's more important, are the lives of humans more important than the lives of another planet. I talk about that in my paper. I should go into more detail about that and like how maybe I can raise moral questions and relate it to environmentalism better. Definitely could do that. Now next I talk about Next, you talk about a lot of the grammatical mistakes and how I should read it out loud, and I definitely should. I agree with you. Yeah, I know you said you read your paper out loud, and I usually do too. I kind of just threw it together late, or I just kind of ran through it real quick before I posted it. I definitely should have read it over more, and I definitely will do that well before the final copy. So I'm going to do that. You said I put a little too much of my own opinion in at the beginning. I agree. I think I should go back and look at that and make sure I take out too much of my opinion because then it gets blurred. You really don't want to do that. Definitely a good point. I need to add more quotes in there. I use a lot of Peterson, but not a lot of the other guys. I am planning on putting those in the final draft. So I'm going to use those more. Definitely should. You wanted me to draw more on theory, use a little more of my paper on the drawing more on the theory at the beginning, and not so much on the movie. I think I definitely agree. I definitely need to put in a couple more pages of the theory, or maybe even 2 or 3 more about the theory, and I will definitely do that for sure. So that pretty much sums up the paper.